The world of professional sports operates like an apex predator ecosystem. It's a ruthlessly hyper-capitalist arena where leverage is the only currency that truly matters and compassion has no place. You aren't compensated for past grievances. You aren't rewarded for progressive social positions. Payment comes from one clear and indisputable measure: your capacity to produce revenue. When you hold the winning hand, you can shape the rules of the empire. But if you enter a boardroom holding a pair of twos, stare down a syndicate of billionaires, and threaten to burn their building to the ground, they won't panic. Instead, they'll lock the doors, change the keys, and calmly watch as you dismantle your own career from the outside. What's unfolding right now in the Women's National Basketball Association is not a routine labor negotiation. It resembles a slow-motion broadcast of corporate self-destruction. Over the last 12 months, the militant veteran leadership of the WNBA Players Association has been acting under a deeply alarming delusion. They truly believed they were untouchable. They examined the unprecedented, multi-billion-dollar surge within the sports economy, growth sparked almost entirely by the arrival of a 24-year-old rookie point guard, and arrogantly concluded that the American public had suddenly pledged its loyalty to the veteran establishment. Convinced they possessed decisive leverage, they believed they could hold the 2026 season hostage, insist on structurally unrealistic 50% revenue splits, push for fully guaranteed maximum contracts, and pressure the billionaire ownership class into surrender. But today is March 10th. The doomsday clock has effectively hit zero. Adam Silver's drop-dead deadline has arrived, and the harsh reality has finally shattered the union's fragile illusion. The billionaires called their bluff.
It's the day of the deadline, the doomsday day for the WNBA-CBA negotiations, and we have been covering this relentlessly for over 6 months now, and it's exhausting. And here we are, it's 4:33 p.m. Central Time on March 10th, and we don't know what's going on. We don't know if a deal is going to get done. Now, the latest news that we have is that the players and the owners, they swapped proposals over the weekend, but they didn't disclose any details about those proposals. Now,
pay close attention to the overwhelming silence coming from an organization in trouble. For half a year, the WNBA Players Association functioned like a leaking ship. They turned the media into a weapon, releasing contract information, posturing through press statements, and handling the collective bargaining agreement as though it were a dramatic reality TV storyline. Music, their intention was to have the public dissect every tiny percentage within their demands. They wanted fans to sympathize with their situation. Yet the moment the March 10th deadline arrived, the union's leadership suddenly disappeared from the conversation. The details stopped flowing. The public back and forth ended.
Why?
Because they finally recognized they were losing. When a labor union falls completely silent at the final moment, it is not evidence of a brilliant strategic maneuver. It signals intense internal panic. The leaks ended because those proposals reveal a harsh reality. The owners have drawn an immovable line, and the union has no meaningful counter left to play. The leadership of the WNBA Players Association, including Terri Carmichael Jackson and Nneka Agwamike, steered their own members to the edge of an economic cliff, failing to realize that the consumers whose support they needed for leverage had already walked away. This leads to the most devastating miscalculation the veteran establishment made throughout this entire situation. They completely eroded their own public goodwill.
Because I feel like there was a point in time when a lot of the public, or the majority of the public, was on the side of the players. However, because we've just known so much about all of this, I think a lot of people have flipped to the side of supporting the league a little bit more. And that's not to say that the fans don't want to see the WNBA players get paid well and be taken care of and be treated like professional athletes. But I think we've just, like I said, I'm not going to say it over and over. We've heard too much. Okay. We've heard too much, but
the pendulum has swung. Those 4 words amount to a death knell for a labor union. Music, in any corporate strike, public opinion functions as your only real shield. If fans place the blame on the billionaires for canceling a season, ownership will eventually bend to protect the value of their global brand. But when the fans instead blame the players, the owners gain absolute and uncontested control. They can simply wait until the opposition runs out of resources. Music, the militant veteran core within the Women's National Basketball Association managed to alienate the very fan base that had been growing so quickly. The working-class American consumer, the person putting in a 40-hour week just to keep up with mortgage payments, watched veteran WNBA players criticize what was already a massive, unprecedented salary cap increase. They saw athletes on the verge of earning hundreds of thousands of dollars publicly complain about not having luxury apartments funded by the league. They also witnessed the veteran establishment push questionable racial investigations, distance themselves from the new audience, and repeatedly frame themselves as victims. Over time, that sense of entitlement became overwhelming. The public examined the historic, life-changing financial proposals being offered by ownership and concluded that the union was holding out because of pure, unfiltered greed mixed with unchecked veteran ego. Fans have grown exhausted. They're tired of the complaints. They're tired of the manufactured drama. The public has now aligned itself with the league, effectively stripping the union of its only real source of leverage. And without the force of public pressure, the staggering incompetence behind the union's negotiating strategy has been laid completely bare.
Sense of urgency when they didn't reply for 6 weeks over the holiday break or whatever, when they weren't getting back with the proposal. But why are we now literally at the 11th hour and they're just now meeting in person? And it's ironic too, because obviously Team USA basketball is preparing for their FIBA World Qualifier games or whatever they are. Honestly, these games, like, I know everybody's excited just to see basketball because we've been only talking about this.
Take a moment to examine the sheer absurdity of this corporate timeline. Music, this is the final, non-negotiable deadline. If an agreement is not reached today, the 2026 season will officially be delayed, and the fragile financial framework of the Women's National Basketball Association immediately begins to unravel. Music, yet the union leadership and the owners are only now sitting down for an in-person meeting at 4:30 in the afternoon. This isn't an example of dramatic, high-stakes corporate negotiation. It's evidence of severe and catastrophic negligence. The leadership of the WNBA Players Association had an entire offseason to complete this historic agreement, but instead they stalled. They engaged in petty maneuvering. They waited 6 painful weeks before responding to league proposals, artificially squeezing the timeline in an attempt to manufacture urgency. Music, some members of their own executive committee even skipped crucial in-person meetings. They handled a multi-billion-dollar corporate negotiation like it was a casual high school debate, assuming the owners were desperate, Music, and would eventually return with a blank check. What they fundamentally failed to understand was who they were dealing with. The billionaire class does not operate under pressure, Music, unless their primary revenue streams are threatened. And the primary revenue stream for these owners is not the WNBA, it's the National Basketball Association. The billionaires remain completely insulated. For 25 straight years, they have subsidized the WNBA's significant financial losses without difficulty. If the union pushes the situation into a lockout, the owners can simply close the gym doors, halt player salaries and health insurance, write the temporary losses off on corporate taxes, and shift their full attention to the enormous profits generated during the NBA playoffs. In effect, the union executives played a game of chicken with a brick wall and ended up wrecking their own vehicle. Right in the middle of this chaotic and disorganized corporate failure, the true face of the sport, the very reason the WNBA is even negotiating a $2 billion media deal, casually revealed how absurd the veteran leadership's position really is. Caitlin Clark, often the central target of the veteran establishment's resentment, stepped up to the microphones and effectively isolated the union's militant faction.
Has been more vocal than she ever has been throughout these CBA negotiations is Caitlin Clark. I'll just read this quick quote from her here. She said, "There is a time crunch and things do need to be solved. It is our responsibility to get something done for not only all of us, the players that are older in this league, the players that are younger in this league, but the generation of hoopers, but the next generation of hoopers, We don't want to lose what we have right now. That's my main focus, and I look forward to playing on April 25th in New York City."
Listen carefully to the remarkable, untouchable corporate maturity in her remarks. While the militant veterans within the WNBA Players Association throw what looks like a temper tantrum, leaking passive-aggressive letters, music, and threatening to burn the season down over fractional revenue percentages, the 24-year-old point guard is speaking like an experienced Fortune 500 executive. Caitlin Clark said it plainly. Asterisk, it's our responsibility to get something done. We don't want to lose what we have right now. Asterisk, Clark understands the harsh, unforgiving reality of the sports, music business. She recognizes that the extraordinary momentum currently surrounding the Women's National Basketball Association is incredibly fragile. She knows the attention economy is unpredictable, and once consumers are pushed away, if games disappear, if fans stop watching, the magic that took decades to build can vanish permanently. She made it clear that her focus is on playing in her first preseason game in April. She wants to be on the court. She wants to take advantage of the massive global audience she personally helped bring to the league. By taking this public position, Clark has effectively dismantled the union's leverage. She is signaling directly to corporate sponsors, television networks, and billionaire owners that she does not support a destructive lockout. In doing so, she presents herself as the rational, dedicated, and highly professional investment, while the veteran establishment risks appearing like a bitter cartel, seemingly willing to damage its own sport simply to prove it still holds authority. This leads to the explosive theory surrounding the entire situation, a theory the mainstream sports media appears reluctant to explore. The militant veterans guiding the WNBA Players Association may not be pushing the league toward the deadline to secure better wages for rank-and-file players. In fact, more than 80% of the league is currently without contracts, anxiously waiting for a deal so they can sign agreements and pay their bills. The argument is that the veteran establishment is pushing toward a lockout because it represents the last desperate mechanism they have to slow the unstoppable rise of Caitlin Clark. Consider the complicated psychology of the old guard. For decades, they presided over a small, culturally insulated, and financially limited kingdom. They determined locker room hierarchy. They expected automatic respect from rookies. They shaped the narratives around the league. Then Clark arrived from University of Iowa. She shattered viewership records. She attracted millions of new fans who had little interest in the unwritten rules of the old system. She secured multi-million-dollar endorsements and instantly shifted the league's cultural and economic spotlight. According to this perspective, some veteran leaders resent that transformation. They resent her massive popularity. They resent spending decades building the foundation only for a rookie to walk in and suddenly command the entire spotlight. And they may fear what happens when she returns for her second professional season, fully healthy, fully rested, adjusted to the pro game, and ready to dominate on her own terms. If a strike were forced, the theory goes, it would erase a year of Clark's athletic prime. It would quiet the momentum temporarily. It would punish the influx of new fans who did not center the legacy players. In that scenario, critics argue the veterans would risk igniting a massive financial crisis, potentially jeopardizing a reported multi-billion-dollar media deal and harming the livelihoods of their own union members, just to demonstrate they still control the power structure. That would amount to weaponized envy and scorched earth economics. Yet such an ego-driven strategy could trigger a corporate disaster that its architects are completely unprepared to face. Music. The union's leadership may believe that if the season disappears, the sports world will pause in solidarity, that the American public will wait in protest until owners surrender. In other words, they believe they are indispensable. What they may be about to confront is one of the harshest principles in entertainment economics: the reality of consumer substitution.
If everybody just thought they had an infinite amount of time, and as long as they got the CBA done before the first season game, that they would be fine. But that part of it all has been a little bizarre to me. And honestly, like, I'm kind of disinterested now. Like, March 10th is here. Like, if they get it done, amazing. Hopefully we can just celebrate the win and move forward and actually start covering basketball. But I will say, if this continues on, like, I'm not going to cover it in the kind of detail that I've been covering it in the past, because it's honestly just not worth my time. We've been doing this.
Sports fans don't owe you their loyalty. They don't owe you their time, music, and they certainly don't owe you their money. If a league refuses to place its product on the court, consumers will simply shift their attention elsewhere, and they won't look back. That is the fatal and irreversible miscalculation critics argue the WNBA Players Association has made. They are threatening a lockout during one of the most crowded, competitive, and profitable stretches on the global sports calendar. If Women's National Basketball Association players refuse to take the court in May, music, television networks won't broadcast empty air. They won't fill programming with sympathetic documentaries about the labor dispute. Instead, they'll redirect billions in advertising revenue toward other major events. They'll pivot to the powerhouse of the NBA playoffs. They'll shift to the cultural phenomenon of NCAA March Madness. They'll highlight the excitement of the World Baseball Classic. And they'll spotlight the global spectacle of international soccer. The American sports audience has an endless menu of elite athletic entertainment. The WNBA had only recently begun carving out a significant portion of that market, largely fueled by the arrival and popularity of Caitlin Clark. Yet instead of securing that position and accepting the historic financial deal reportedly on the table, critics argue that the veteran leadership chose to hold the consumer hostage. The reaction from the public has largely been apathy. Fans appear tired of the drama. They're muting notifications, stepping away from the controversy, and simply moving on with their lives. And once fans move on, leverage disappears. League figures such as Adam Silver, Cathy, Engelbert, and team owners can see the shift clearly. They are watching as the union's public goodwill erodes, and as some fans signal they no longer care whether the season happens or not. Without public pressure, the owners have little reason to give ground on the union's demands. Music, according to this view, ownership could place a final, firm proposal on the negotiating table, one that requires the union to concede. It could also include strict exclusivity provisions designed to prevent players from forming rival leagues such as Unrivaled. If veteran leadership refuses to accept those terms, owners could simply lock arenas, suspend salaries and benefits, and shift their attention to the massive profits generated during the NBA postseason. And if the WNBA season were canceled, the argument goes, Caitlin Clark's personal career would likely remain unaffected. She could redirect her enormous and loyal audience toward international competition, sponsorship appearances, or broadcast platforms such as TNT Sports, while continuing to earn major endorsement income regardless of a league shutdown. Critics say the veteran leadership gambled the largest financial opportunity in the history of women's basketball in a high-stakes confrontation with billionaires, and only realized at the last moment that they were bluffing with a weak hand. In that interpretation, the free market ultimately called the bluff. Now, the question shifts to the fans. Did the players' union damage its own leverage by exhausting public goodwill with constant disputes and media drama? Are veteran players truly resisting change because of resentment toward Caitlin Clark's meteoric rise? And if a lockout cancels the season, would you simply move on to other sports or wait for the league to return? Share your thoughts below. If you're interested in deeper discussions about the business side of sports, the power struggles in corporate boardrooms, and the stories many outlets hesitate to cover, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. More analysis is coming in the next video.